that this reading, compared to the other classes that I teach, I find it really enjoyable. Like, I read these chapters, and I look back and I say, wow, this was easy reading, but what exactly did I get out of it? Okay? And what I seem to get out of it is the basic structure and thinking process, but not the details that you would need to know about. Is that okay? Now, so today what we're going to do is, you're supposed to read chapter 2, and we're going to talk about, if I had this as a system definition, what are the different types of systems? What are the generic different types of systems? So we're going to discuss that after we've discussed this. I want you to tell me, because I feel very uncomfortable when I put something on the board like this, and I say somebody's paid to be in a class. I feel really uncomfortable with this deal because I don't think that you're getting what you're supposed to get. It's like you're reading a newspaper and you know about it, but what can I do about it is a little bit more difficult. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time today on the structure of, I have entities. Let's talk about entities. I want you to understand that I want to really focus on interconnectivity. All right? And we're going to talk a little bit about goals and objectives. Let's take the easiest. In a system, what could be an entity? Yes, sir. Me. All right. An entity, Bill is an entity. Is that correct? What consists, what is the definition of an entity? So, could people be an entity? Could machines be an entity? Could material be an entity? Could information be an entity? So all of those things that are required as resources for things that you have to put in place for that system to work. What could they? Could desk, I mean, I know this is not a good example, but I want you to kind of think. Could a desk be an entity? Say yes. Yes. Not a good entity, but not the critical entity. So when we are looking at entities, we are looking at entities at different levels, okay? At the most highest level, it is what? People, material, equipment, infrastructure, information. Would you agree with that? At a more lower level, I could say I have a chair. These are entities. Now, I'm going to ask you a question here. What is the most important entity?
Information.
I don't know. You tell me. I have entities, and I want you to understand, yes, these are required, but I want you to have a mindset of not just memorizing, but a mindset that says, this is the way I think. For you, of all of the entities that I asked you of, right? When you design systems, in my mind, I have a priority in my mind that says, oh my God, if I'm going to develop this, the most important entities are the following. Boom, 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 boom. I'm not right. First of all, let me say I am not right, but I have my own way of thinking about designing systems. So of these things that we mentioned, which ones of those do you believe is the most important entity?
Infrastructure.
Wouldn't it depend on the
I
system?
mean, you may not have them all in a particular system, so, but I think it's Bill, that's all.
Bill.
Bill?
The one that, I mean, wouldn't it be different for every system because the entities have to support the function or the objective of the organization or the system?
I would say to some extent, yes. But I would say that is not to me. Again, I'm relaying it from my perspective to you because my job is not to only tell you what the book says, it is also to tell you what I think. And your job is to say, I think he's really, really wrong. I think the most important entity that I design my systems on is people. people are the most important entities. Now, that does not mean that if they don't have material, that they can function. It is not that they can, but to me, the driver of how many machines, what I run, how many parts I have, what information it requires, etc., is the key driver of that system to me is people. And if I have people that have a particular culture, they in themselves will provide the interconnectivity that they want. They will design that interconnectivity. Are we okay with that? Because some of you said information.
Yeah, I see the information almost closer to the interconnectivity in that if we have these great people, but they never write anything down, they never pass that knowledge on to the other people. They never pass that information on.
Okay.
And we lose it.
But I want you to kind of think, and I want you to disagree, because when you leave here, you have your own mindset, and you are a unique individual that within this structure has to design the systems that you want. All I'm saying to you is, I always think that if I could get people to behave in a certain way aligned with the organization, they will find the right materials and the right equipment and all that. The right equipment will not find the right people. Information is going to be to. So that's the perspective that I'm coming from, again, but I'm not sure that that's correct. Okay. Now, so we have this idea of what entities are. Let's talk about goals, because I'm going to spend a fair amount of time on this. Let's talk about goals. For the last 2 days, we have been working with industry, about what, 14, 15 people, something like that are there. And we meet with them twice every month. And what we are doing is working with this industry to develop a culture. And we call it the lean culture, but it's not about lean, it's about ability to develop a culture. Here's my thought processes, because we all know what goals and objectives are, right? What are your goals and objectives? Tell me.
What?
What?
Being here or?
I don't know,
work?
whatever you want to talk to me about. Because I'm going to show you, and I want you again to disagree with me, right? You're going to disagree. That most measurements of systems don't measure the well-being of the system, but measure and manage people or entities. If I'm saying to you that all of these entities have an interconnectivity, oh, blah, 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 you know, it's all fixed together, and somehow this thing is creating this behavior, right? This outcome. We were yesterday with a company that measured attendance. Is an attendance the outcome or the performance of a system? Yes or no? Huh?
Yes. Yes.
It has an effect on that.
It has an effect on it. But watch this. And the example that I gave is the following. If I told my wife, I'm going to manage the amount of money you spend. I'm going to manage, Jeremy, where are you? I'm going to manage where you're going to go. I'm going to manage, I don't know what. You know, who you see, well, I don't know what it is. But if I manage that, all of that, do you think that I would get the performance that is really required? That's bad. But you see, the point that I'm trying to make is, we manage entities, we do not manage what? We measure entities, but we do not measure in our goals what? The system performance. And we believe that because we can manage entities, that I can manage Bill, like this. I can stand here, right next to Bill, okay? But do you think that is going to make Bill a better or worse student?
Probably worse.
Do you think it's going to, I'm managing. So why do we have measures that are not based on the system, and the well-being of the system. And why do we measure not the system, but what? Entities. How many of you in production measure availability? What is availability? It has an impact. Attendance has an impact. Availability has an impact, but in itself does not comprise that goal. What is the goal at Y12? My understanding, I'm just going to say it because that's all I know, is mission. Is that true? Hmm?
Make a product, whatever it might be.
But to produce a product to meet the mission.
Right.
In your departments, what do you measure? Do you measure that?
No.
What do you measure?
In my department, we measure availability because we support the.
Because the assumption is that availability has something to do with,
Meeting the mission.
but how do you know that for sure?
Because
We actually do
if not, the
track
lights are off to the building.
Well,
We actually do kind of track that.
because here's what I'm going to say to you. Availability can or cannot be important. Attendance can or cannot be important, depending upon what? This interconnectivity. If that equipment is not a critical piece of equipment, if that function that that person is doing is not a critical piece of thing, then it does not have that much of an impact. It may still have an impact, unless you tell me, my God, that is the most critical piece of equipment, that individual is the most critical individual that there is, and therefore, because I measure that, I know that there is a direct relationship to the goals and the objectives. So how do you know if whatever you are measuring, watch this, because we're talking about systems at a different level, so we're kind of confusing this. How do you know what you measure in your departments has anything to do with the mission of ORNL, with the mission of Y12, or with Rubbermaid? It is dependent upon the understanding of that structure, that interconnectivity. This is, in my opinion, where your strength lies, is understanding and modeling that interconnectivity. Say yes. So it's going to make me, and who else taught last semester? Dr. Garcia and Reed. It's going to make us happy. So what is your expertise? Your expertise is on what?
Reducing waste.
On understanding and modeling interconnectivity. To say, oh my God, we got interconnectivity, but if you cannot analyze it, put it together, understand it, and there's not one model, there's about 20,000 different models that you can use to understand that connectivity. I think we have two different slides, or one.
I just saw the one, but I didn't scroll down yet either.
This is something that you learned last semester, and I want to know why we are bringing this back here, because I have no idea of what this means. Not only do I not understand what this means, I have no idea what this has to do with this. Can somebody enlighten me?
It's a way to measure the system.
The performance of the system. Way to measure.
Way to
performance
measure your
of the system.
efficiency.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But it says throughput. Okay? And I want you to make sure that you understand this is just one model, and I've got two different things that I'm bringing into you today. All right? There are two things. These are just two examples of your understanding of what? Interconnectivity. And I'm going to even start with one that is more fundamental than any of these things that we're going to bring in. When you did a value stream map, for those that did it, What did the value stream map do for you? What did the value stream map, you say process number 1, process number 2, 3, 4, and you put arrows together and you connected it, and you say if these things were connected, all right, and I got my input coming in and I got my output coming in, is that not the simplest form of a representation of interconnectivity? From a very different perspective. Do you remember that? So if I say, hey, process 1, process 3, process 5, process 6, and I said, here goes this goes here, this takes this much time, etc. down the line, was that in your mind, when I say interconnectivity, did it connect in your mind, not completely, not robustly, not well, but did it provide you the insight of what interconnectivity means? Okay? So if I had a value stream map, and I connected, what entities did I connect?
Stakeholders.
Value add and non-value add in the process.
That was good, that was good. But that was, I need more than that, entities.
Process steps.
What was included in that process step?
People.
Equipment,
Critical entities.
people, material. And if I took the top portion of the value stream map, information. So it provides me a simplistic view of interconnectivity. Is this not what the value stream map did? Oh, here's a process, here's a process, here's a process, etc. And then I connected these, and I said, that we would bring supplies in, we would send it to the people, this is how we would schedule it, information is sent here, etc. down the line. Did we not do that? So, if I am reading that book, you should already state to me that I already know not all the models that would give me insight into the interconnectivity, because here's the thing. Entities in many cases are given to you. You can increase them or reduce them. Goals, in many cases, you are already given, but you can modify. For the companies that were there, and they represented healthcare, manufacturing, distribution, and government. You know what they're going to go back and do? They're going to modify, not completely, but they're going to refine their goals and objectives. Okay? The key is, in my opinion, is this structure, this interconnectivity. Understanding it, being able to analyze it, being able to model it, and being able to figure out how to improve that to get the objectives with the amount of entities that you have. Is that not it? So now, given that, so we have, can I say that you are experts on interconnectivity? Say yes. Say yes. Given that framework of a value stream map, I don't know what this means. It is not complete. It is only a slice of representing a system, right? But it says if your goal is to increase the amount of production that is going to go through that system, that I can do that by doing two different things. One, I want you, this is your output. So if I brought this over here, then it would be this WIP divided by CT. What does WIP represent?
Work in progress.
But in essence, it represents resources provided to that system. So I can increase that performance of that system by increasing what? Resources. And when I say WIP, it doesn't mean just material, it means people, infrastructure, material, information. I can enhance that. What does this represent?
Time it takes
The amount of
to
time it
complete.
takes to.
What's that?
The amount of time it takes to make your product.
the amount of time that it makes to, so that from the start of the system to the end of the system, from the start of this interconnectivity to the end of this interconnectivity, that system, I can increase the throughput by reducing this time. This time only gives you a framework of what you need to do, and therefore you understand, oh my God, what's wrong with the system. Is that not true? Okay. So I want to ask Mark. Mark, would Y12, and this is true Rubbermaid, and I'll talk to O&L, would Y12 prefers to increase and meet their mission by adding additional resources, or by doing it in, the word is bad, in a more efficient way?
You can do both, and we have done both.
Okay. But the preference would be what?
Preference would be efficiencies.
The preference would be, it's not that we cannot, if not required, we cannot get more resources, but the preference is what? Now, from last semester, because I want you to understand that we're just not talking about terms. I want you to explain to me, because you're the experts, how I do this. This interconnectivity of connecting people and information and machines and equipment and all that, now that I know, I got a mindset. Oh, reduce the time. That's not the only thing. Reduce the time. Tell me, how would you do it? What did you learn?
No, in my job, we would have to work on the structure of the system to get efficiencies. I think everyone in this room realizes in their own job where efficiencies are, but if the system's telling you you've got to do A, B, C, D through Z before you can go out and complete your product, if some of those barriers that we think are inefficient are there, or those bottlenecks weren't there, we could be more efficient at that time.
Fair enough. Okay. Can I give you better? Yes, sir.
I was gonna say, we reduce it, you're supposed to reduce it based on the Toyota production system, and then you need to measure all your components and start looking at things like variation and,
Waste.
yeah,
Can
level
I-
of inventory, that kind of thing.
Can I take this out? Because I want you to have a language, because I want to make sure. So are you saying, let me see if this is what you're saying, that I can look at this interconnectivity with the focus of trying to make it quicker, not the only thing to do, all right? Because what we're doing is connecting a systems thinking to material that you already have. And you say, hey, I can improve this interconnectivity. I can improve this interconnectivity. Well, is it possible that the way you think is this? You have the ability to say yes. No, don't make a face where you say, "Ooh, what is this?" You're gonna say, "Oh yeah, I know that," even if you don't. All right. I want to understand interconnectivity, so I can look at that interconnectivity from a perspective of flow. I can look at it from a perspective of variation, and I can look at it from a perspective of disruptions, and I can combine the whole thing. I can look at it from all three perspectives. What is flow?
Things come in and go out.
What's that?
How things come into the system and go out.
Watch this. Not that this was necessary. I'm just trying to bring in what you know. To create a single piece flow means what is it that you have to do?
still doesn't reduce variation.
I mean, and I can continue because I think you will remember this. If I put it in, I said, what is flow? Flow is two things. The balance in the system, so I can look at that interconnectivity from a perspective of balance in the system, and the amount of material that continuously flows like water. Flows like water, one-piece flow. How do I get a one-piece flow? I have to reduce the lot size. I have to balance the line. I have to do a lot of stuff that you learned in Lean. We look at this thing in terms of a tremendous amount of depth. Tell me about variation in the system.
I have a question first.
Yes, sir.
So, maybe it's because I do Lean all the time, but when you're looking at a system as a whole, and this is how we do it, we try to focus on which one of the 8 wastes that we have, and then that's what you would go back and start to process it like this. Is that because for us, we don't have necessarily the resources to be able to do everything, like reset all of it, but if we know that we're overproducing, well, now we can go back and focus on the areas that would help us to not overproduce. Or if we know that we have excess motion, we can go back and focus on. Isn't that the base of all this, is those 8 wastes of lean manufacturing?
I think, to me, I don't like 8 wastes. I don't want anybody to tell me what waste is. I should be able to know what good enough and well enough what waste is. What waste at Y12 is not waste at Rubbermaid. Because I can justify Y12 to say this is based on safety and security, and therefore I have to do this. So it's like cooking. I either have a vision of what I want to cook, and then I let the ingredients fall where they may. Or I can come up with a set amount of ingredients and then mechanically just put them together without a vision of what it's going to really have. When I focus in on the 8 waste, I'm mechanically just doing something without really understanding the system's view of what I'm doing. Oh, I see these keys are here. Watch this. Why are these keys here? I don't know. This is waste. This is, I don't know, waste of whatever. That has nothing to do with the system view. So we only use mechanical approaches when we do not have the wisdom or the vision to see what it is that we're trying to do. And what we are trying to train you is not to be mechanical in your nature, but to be strategic in your nature, because I would assume that ORNL, Y12, or Rubbermaid doesn't want you to go out and look and reduce 8 waste. They want you strategically to go into your systems and your subsystems and to enhance that system to be able to align with the mission. And I know that is so against Lean.
That's against everything that my department stands.
Well, it's not necessarily that your department is wrong. Your job here is to see what your department is saying, what we are telling you, and you make the choice of what you think you want to do.
So can I give an example? So the way that I used to do, like when we used to run projects like the LSS project, those are things that we would look at, but that's not how we would define our project to say we want to go reduce this type of waste or one of these types of waste. We would do a brainstorming session and then pick which type of you would do the benefits and efforts matrix to see, okay, which project do we think would have the most impact for the least amount of resources. But then as we're running the project, then we would incorporate how do we reduce those types of waste. Once we determine what our scope and goal was, then we try to incorporate all those steps into that.
Are you a golfer?
Yeah.
I'm not. So I'm going to tell you something that I don't know how to do.
All right.
All right? Are you a golfer?
Yeah.
How did you learn?
Practice.
Did somebody say to you, hold your hands this way,
Yeah.
you know, stand like this,
Right.
all right? Just because of those, did you become a great golfer?
No.
Those are the fundamentals, but they did not lead you. Are there people that inherently are so good that do it without knowing all the steps?
Oh, yeah.
This is the idea, I think, where our weaknesses are, is that we catch on to mechanical attributes without understanding overall what these mechanical attributes are going to do for our system. Right? So here we're talking about flow. I just want, again, I'm just bringing a few slides and I'm going to leave it up on the blackboard for you if you want to, so that you can kind of, do you remember flow? The whole Toyota production system was about flow. So you have perspective into connectivity. All right? Talk to me about variation.
There's two types, standard and common special, or common variation and special cause.
What's that?
The two types of variation, common variation and special cause variation.
Yeah, this is good. Tell me about variation. Here's what I'm going to say.
It's bad.
Using it as good.
It degrades the performance of the whole system.
I would say, and here's, I mean, without knowing who you are or what your families are, the greater the inconsistency in your family, the greater the trouble that you have in your family. The more inconsistent your kids are, your spouses are, or you are, the greater the problems in that family. Now, you're supposed to disagree. Tell me. You have to disagree with me.
No, it's true. It's the most stressful because you never know what's coming. You can't prepare your mind for it.
Sometimes that's one of the best things.
You don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Wait till you get that inconsistent credit card bill.
They're always inconsistent.
But I would say unless you're always just running 150% and digging yourself in the ground, either with your credit card, if you're consistently going into credit card debt, or for instance.
I don't think the problem, and I'll say this, I don't think the problem is as bad on your stress level if you know you or your spouse or your kids consistently overspend. What is the problem is at the end of the month when you have no idea of that month, and all of a sudden you get a bill for $16,333 for I don't know what.
Jeez.
What is it?
First.
A purse, that's right. A purse. I believe that it's going to cause you a heart attack.
Heart attack.
Now, I want, again, please, we're not reviewing last semester for the purpose of saying, because I'm assuming that you know this material. I'm only relaying it to the fact that I don't believe this book gives you sufficient ability to do things. It tells you why you want to do it, but it doesn't tell you what needs to be done. Tell me about variation. Tell me more about variation.
It degrades the performance of the system, and you have to throw a whole bunch of resources and buffering and stuff.
Very good. So that as, if you remember, as variation increases, okay, what happens to my cycle time? Not by 10% or 20%, it increases by exponentially. So when I have variation in the process, at 10% variation, 20% variation, 30% coefficient of variation, remember this, coefficient of variation, what I always see is my cycle time goes where? Not from 100 to 120, but goes from 100 to 200, goes from 100 to 300. And all of a sudden, I am doing what? If this increases,
Throw more resources at it. Increasing your throughput.
my throughput goes down. Now, I want you to understand this. How much variation does it exist in Rubbermaid, at ORNL, and at Y12 together, and what is the impact to that system? whether you look at the system as your department or overall, I want you to tell me the impact of variation. I'll give you a number, not your number, but out of literature. What do you think the impact is?
I know we'd probably lose millions of dollars a year, easily. Or million pieces of product, which would be potentially billions of dollars just off of variation. That's probably 30 to 40% reduction in what we could do.
Here's the numbers out of industry. Does not mean that it relates to you. If you have $1 billion budget, and you in general have a 3+ sigma process, which is average or average processes in terms of variation. You know what your, according to statistics, what your cost of quality is? 25% to 40% of your overall revenue. So how much does that come? 250 million to 400. Let's just talk about that student. How did they come up with the number? How many times did you produce something that somebody else didn't need? How many times did you produce something that was difficult? How many times did you produce something that somebody says there's an error? How many times did you catch an error? How many quality people do you have auditing? How many audits do you have? How many inspections do you have? How many times did you send something that you had to go to the customer and apologize because of what you sent? If I added all of those numbers, which is a driver of that is variation, and you have average processes, not below, not great, then you have a fair amount of money, $200 million, $300 million, $400 million of it is spent on managing that. Would you believe that? So, why is that important? Why are we bringing it up in a systems class? Because you have a perspective of looking at that interconnectivity from a perspective of flow, say yes. From a perspective of variation, say yes. Okay. And I think one of the things we can do is, if you feel uncomfortable with flow or uncomfortable with variation, we can have, for a few people that feel uncomfortable, we can have a side class, and say, can you spend 2 hours and tell us in a lecture, because I could take you through this lecture, but I think that you see all this. Is that correct? Now, tell me about disruption. What is disruption? A system has inherent variation. Watch. He is not sitting the way he normally sits. Why is he not sitting the way he normally sits? That's variation. That has nothing to do with his learning in this class at this moment, is it? It is a variation, but it is not called a disruption. What is a disruption?
Anything that stops your flow.
Breakdowns. Okay, a good word. Breakdowns of what?
Entities.
Ah, an excellent job. Breakdown of entities. What entities? My parts are not here. My equipment is not here. My people are not here. What else did we talk? Information that I needed is not here. All of those entities, the non-availability of those entities in the system is a perspective that you can look at that interconnectivity. Are we okay? Question from last semester. Is small breakdowns frequently have greater impact or large breakdowns infrequently? Very nice. Oh, we learned something. This is impressive. In your facilities, do you have frequent small breakdowns, or do you have large breakdowns?
All the above.
No, you cannot say that. You cannot have these things.
We have it all.
No. Now, here's a question. So everybody has disruptions, right? Question is here related to systems. What in that system is creating that disruption? You see that thought process? What in that system is creating a flow issue? What in that system is creating a variation issue? What in that system is creating a disruption issue? That is where, if I could give you the interconnectivity, you're connected to him, this, and we have that interconnectivity, your job is to be able to say, hey, where are the problems? How would I look at it? How would I analyze it? And how would I come back with a better interconnectivity? Fair enough? I'm going to show you one more thing. Does anybody know what queuing theory is? Say yes, just make it up. All right. Queuing is, the reason I said just make it up is because you have lived with queuing theory all your life. Have you waited outside the restaurant? Have you waited outside the movie theater? Have you waited to get a document back? I mean, one of the things that we were is, I got some of the documents or your proposals or your projects at the end of the semester because somebody had to approve them. Right? Waiting. Is that another way of looking at interconnectivity? We just want to have different perspectives on interconnectivity. So, a queuing theory has several different components. These are there for you. I just want for you to show that there are different models to look at. For me, for example, one of my students was talking about they wanted to collect information out of Children's Hospital to reduce diabetes in children. Okay. I asked them, I said, well, we're going to do a survey, we're going to collect this data from Children's Hospital, and then we're going to put a model together to be able to predict what the factors are and all that. I said, how do you know what to put into that survey if you do not know what causes diabetes? You cannot fix a system unless you inherently understand the fundamental linkages within that system. We have queuing theory that says this arrival rate, people, entities arrive into a system. So it's just not people. Any entity can arrive into a system. Depending upon that arrival rate, watch this, depending upon that arrival rate and what is happening to that arrival, and the fundamentals of how we create a server or how we provide service will determine the amount of waiting time that exists. Fundamentally, all of this mathematical formulation is about this. When I look at the system like Rubbermaid, ORNL, or Y12, do you believe that this is a good insight into understanding relationships? Because maybe not Rubbermaid, but ORNL and Y12, I believe, have significant, difficult, and complex problems. Because I am not only looking at, watch this, interconnectivity of two people. I'm looking at the interconnectivity within a department. Then that interconnectivity with the interconnectivity of another department, but whether there's an interconnectivity of the department or the individuals in that department, I am not sure. And then I have many of these complex departments that comprise of the system. So what interconnectivity am I supposed to look at? Of the people within the department, between departments officially, or between individuals in different departments, or overall system? What interconnectivity are we talking about? And how do you measure and analyze that interconnectivity? One way is to understand this thing right here, and I'll show you. I'm supposed to be standing on this side. If this is the system that gives me, my God, this is not the solution. This is to only give you the tools to become the doctor of systems. If I go to a physician and the physician just knows one thing, not a great thing. They're looking at you as a system, are they not? And if this system cannot be looked at from one perspective, they'll send you to a specialist. Why? Why did they send you to a specialist? Because they don't have the set of tools. Each individual has a set of tools that understands that system. This is another tool that allows you to understand that system. Is there a lot of waiting time in your systems? Why is that important? I mean, because if I have a lot of stuff in this queue, what does that have to do with Little's Law? Waiting time increases, cycle time increases, what happens? Your throughput or your output goes down. Not true, is it true? So I want to look at and you told me from last semester that waiting time seems to be the biggest issue. It's not process time, it's not setup time, it's not moving time, it is the waiting time. So I'm looking at waiting time. Here is something that I can look at waiting time. Now, if I'm going to look at waiting time, in order to do that kind of stuff, I have to be able to collect some information. Now, when you put it in the form of these things, it looks like, I don't want to do this. But you have all this information. There's nothing new here. It's just that it's a fancier version of what you know. You know how long it takes? How often you receive stuff? If you know those basic kind of information, you have the information to be able to look at something from a queuing perspective. The rate of arrivals and customers. The average time between arrivals. Oh my God, I just took 1 and divided by that number and I changed the terminology. So you said, oh, it's sophisticated. It's not. What is the basic information? Do I know or do I not know the arrival rates? Do I know the process times or do I not know the process times? Do I know the number of entities or do I not know the number of entities? And if I know those things, this becomes really, really simple. Watch this. What if I showed you that if you did this, if I could show you how to do it, for every linkage in that system, or for the overall system, you can understand the average number of things waiting in a line, the average time they wait in a line, the average number of people in the system, and the average number of time that you spend in the system. Would that be useful to you? Right. Now, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna send this slides to you. Okay? And it is gonna look really, really bad. All right? And I want you to take a look at it. I don't want you to memorize a thing. I want you to understand, if you understand the basis of queuing theory. Why? Because at this moment, I can always give you the equations later on. I want you to see, for example, if I asked you right now to review a system, go and review that system. How would you do it? I just want to know, how would you do it? Let's assume that you had not taken the lean class or the operations research class or this system class, and I said, hey, I want you to go give me a report on what is wrong with that system. How would you do it?
I'd make a map of the system and the interconnectivities.
What's that?
I'd make it, I'm talking too much, I'm sorry. I'd make a map of the system and the interconnectivities.
And then, but what map would you create? How would you analyze that map?
And then measure the time.
Well, that, no, you suppose you're not taking the class.
Yeah, you don't know all that yet.
I'll tell you what you would have done. You would go talk to a few people. You would say, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And then you write a report. And do you think that my wife has the right, complete perspective on my household? Do you think I have the right perspective? So if she says, he's an awful person, and I said, I'm a good person, how would you make that connection? Am I an awful person or am I a good person?
You're probably okay.
You just average it out. All right? Are we okay with this? Because it concerns me. It concerns me. I want you to flip, if you can, through chapter 1 of this. There's not much.